Talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Wednesday morning edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. You know, I'll be totally transparent. We've been having some internet issues in the Torres compound this morning. I am praying that we have no issues, because when you talk about an all-time show that this is shaping up to be, this could be, frankly, again, an all-timer. We're going to get you updated on Lane Kiffin, talk a little bit about the Pat McAfee stuff. Also, an interesting report reveals this thing may be happening. He really may be walking away from a playoff contender. We'll discuss all that. From there, college football playoff rankings were out. I thought they were terrible. Everybody's focused on Notre Dame versus Bama. I think that's certainly a conversation, but I think the bigger conversation is Notre Dame versus BYU, and BYU is about to get railroaded right out of this college football playoff. We'll discuss them. And then from there, we got to talk more college hoops. I did an instant reaction when Kentucky lost to Michigan State on Tuesday night. They got beat up. We're going to have more reaction. We got some Mark Pope sound that you got to hear. He thinks he can fix it. Should we believe him? We'll talk a little bit about Duke, Kansas. I actually think Kansas looks really good, and if they could just get Darren Peterson back, they'll be good to go. We'll talk about a little brouhaha in Fayetteville. There's a reason they call it Fayette-Nam. Elbows were flowing and throwing on Tuesday night. And then we will wrap top 10 matchup. First top 10 matchup in store, or top 5 matchup in Stores, Connecticut, since Torres was a student at UConn. Arizona at UConn. We will preview that to end the show. A lot of football, a lot of basketball. Nobody does a better crossover college football, college basketball show than me. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we get started, make sure if you're not subscribed after this week, what are you doing? You can find us on YouTube. We are past 65,000 subscribers. I want to get to 70 before the new year. I think we can do it. We need your support. Make sure also to listen on podcasts. You want to do your boy Torres a favor, find the podcast feed. Just download the podcast. If you listen on YouTube, that's okay. If you're on the podcast feed, we appreciate your support. Leave a 5-star rating. Leave a review. Know who else's support we appreciate? Our friends and our official hotel and casino partners, Circa Sportsbook, Circa Casino. Okay, so I want to give Circa a shout out. I was there last week or 2 weeks ago for the Florida-Arizona game, that little doubleheader there was with Villanova BYU as well. I'm going out next week for the Players Era. We're supposed to have a little get-together for Torres superfans, but it kind of fell apart. Anyway, I bring it up because Circa has been an unbelievable partner. When it fell apart, it was on my end, not anybody else's, but not really mine, but it doesn't really matter. The point I'm trying to make, Circa is an incredible hotel and casino partner. I'll be there all next week in the lead up to Thanksgiving for the Players Era tournament. And all I'll say is a couple things. One, when you are in Vegas, this is the spot that you have to go to. Best casino, best hotel, best sports book. It's the only Vegas casino that caters to sports fans. Huge sports book, Stadium Swim, you know all about that. What you might not know is that they have now opened up a brand new sports book at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky. This is on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. And it's just all the great parts of the Vegas casino have now been brought to the East Coast, have been brought to Kentucky, Franklin, Kentucky, Mint Kentucky Downs, all the same hospitality, the best place to watch games. You don't need a million apps. You don't need YouTube TV or Charter or this or Peacock or Paramount. All you got to do is go to that Circa Sportsbook at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky. Minutes from Bowling Green. Oh, by the way, on top of that, it's about 35, 40 minutes from Nashville. So thank you to Circa for their support. And I will very much be at that Mint Kentucky Downs location here in the coming weeks, but we'll certainly do a big thing in the lead up to March Madness. With that said, it is a busy Wednesday morning. When I say busy, I ain't lying here. No more time to waste. So, folks, let's go ahead and do it. let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day. Listen, I'd be remiss if we didn't once again start with Lane Kiffin. Okay. And I know some of you are tired of the Lane Kiffin talk. This is maybe right now the biggest story in sports. We have this unbelievable reclamation project. This guy that has been in the spotlight. He's 50. He's been in the spotlight for half of his life at this point. Play caller at USC. I believe he was the youngest head coach in NFL history at the time when he gets hired by the then Oakland Raiders. Goes to Tennessee. There's a riot on campus when he leaves. Gets fired on the tarmac at USC. Reclamation project, Nick Saban OC. And now he has a team that is good enough to win the national championship in college football. And he really might give it all up for another job. It's unbelievable. I was thinking about this morning. He's kind of the Forrest Gump of college football, right? Or of football, maybe even. I mean, think about all the people that he's been tied to. Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, Pete Carroll, Nick Saban, USC. If you're a Southern football fan, you've been familiar with him. An NFL football fan, you're familiar with him. A West Coast football fan, you're familiar with him. And again, we have this incredible reclamation project that he may be ready to give up on before he sees it to the finish. It is unbelievable. It is the biggest story in sports. And I think we've gotten probably a few interesting updates since we were last on air. Now, we got off air right as he went on Pat McAfee on Tuesday morning. Now, admittedly, the interview is basically 24 hours old at this point. I'm sure for many of you, it would be well past 24 hours. I'd be remiss, though, if we didn't at least mention that. You know, the big storyline coming in was, you know, what was he going to say? Was he going to talk about his future? Was he going to talk about other jobs? Was he going to talk about this? Was he going to talk about that? I certainly think the most newsworthy thing out of the McAfee interview came when he was asked about the reported deadline and the reported ultimatum that Ole Miss has given him. Basically, if you are not committed to us by the Egg Bowl, you got to pack your bags and get out of here. Producer Matt, play Lane Kiffin on McAfee.
Actions that come with having success. You just talked about the past 3 years being an absolute juggernaut down there in the SEC for Ole Miss. All the success you've had in the past, your name is a topic of discussion everywhere, seemingly, and will be for the rest of your life. It's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing because it means that you're having success, which is why other people are certainly going to mention your name whenever jobs open up. But there's a rumor now circulating on the internet, and we appreciate you joining us here to maybe kind of clarify this. Was there like an ultimatum given to you in the middle of a season from Ole Miss? It feels like the way I'm reading it on the internet is that Ole Miss has told you, and you were doing yoga, I guess, this morning with the AD. Ole Miss has told you, like, we need an answer. Is that true? And how are you handling it all with the team with what's currently taking place?
Yeah, that's absolutely not true. There's been no ultimatum, anything like that at all. And so I don't know where that came from, like a lot of stuff that comes out there. Like I said, man, we're having a blast. I love it here. I mean, our running back's sitting right over here. Come on over. And it just couldn't be better. Like I said, you pray for things. Our fans prayed for this type of thing, and now we're in the middle of it. So enjoy it. You're 10-1. You're getting ready. You got a bye week. You get to watch half the country lose, and there's no way we can lose Saturday. And then you play the Egg Bowl and go dominate that and keep that Egg Bowl trophy home where it's been for a long time.
So that was Lane Kiffin on McAfee. Listen, I'm not here to criticize anybody. McAfee, if he can get the interview, he should get it. I certainly do think we were hoping for a little bit more clarification, maybe a few tougher questions on Lane Kiffin's future. But what I'll also say is this. I also sort of blame Lane Kiffin. If he's not going to say anything, I'm surprised he took the interview. But what I would also add to it is that very quickly after Lane Kiffin did that interview and after that piece of the interview came out, I think most people were pretty quick to dispute Lane Kiffin's version of events. Now, only Lane Kiffin and Keith Carter, the AD, know what's going on. What I will say, because we talked about it on yesterday's show, listen, do I think that there is a quote-unquote literal ultimatum that if Lane Kiffin does not give an answer by, 11:59 p.m. Eastern the day before the Egg Bowl, they're not going to let him coach the game? Like, I don't know that is somewhere in writing or somewhere set in stone. But what I have heard, what I believe jives with what basically everybody else is saying, is that basically they have made it clear, like, we want a decision and we want it soon, and we're not waiting until the end of time for you to figure out what you want. And I think it's for a few reasons. I think one, first of all, it goes back to what we've talked about, right? Lane Kiffin, to his credit, has created incredible momentum for Ole Miss football. You know what's the quickest way for that momentum to completely disappear? Let Lane Kiffin finish out the season. And by the way, Ole Miss fans, he does this every year. He always waits until the end of the season. Well, you can't do it this year because of the way the calendar breaks, right? We've talked about it a million times. Opening round, college football playoff, December 20th and 21st. If you wait until the end of the year to let him decide, you could be looking at a scenario where it's after Christmas in which you are replacing a head coach. How about this? Let's say they win a game. Now you're talking about January 1st and 2nd. And so it goes back to what I just said a minute ago. You cannot wait on Lane Kiffin, because if you do, guess what ends up happening? The high school recruiting period is done. All of the high school players are signed. All of the good coaches are gone by the time you get to Christmas and, of course, January 1st, January 2nd. And then on top of it, the transfer portal opens. And if you're trying to get a guy in place January 1st, January 2nd, a day before the portal opens, and he hasn't hired a staff, it's just not realistic. So people will blame the calendar, but there's nothing you can do. And the calendar isn't designed for a head coach to leave in the middle of a playoff run. Like, it's just the truth. So don't blame the calendar, because when people created the calendar, they didn't assume that guys would be leaving in the middle of the playoff or right before the playoff. So is there a hard and fast ultimatum? I don't know. But what I do know is they have made it pretty clear, if you are not going to be here long term, we need to know now, and we're not going to let you make that decision. And it's interesting because, I've focused so much on what I just talked about, the calendar and the playoff, and you can't wait long because of this and that. What I think I had forgotten, though, is that Ole Miss actually went through all this 3 years ago. So it's really interesting. We've credited this guy a million times over the course of the season. I think he's doing the best journalism in college football right now. His name's John Talty. He works for CBS. And so on Tuesday, he released a report basically explaining exactly what I just said. There may be no hard and fast ultimatum, but a decision has to be made, and has to be made soon. And part of the reason that Ole Miss is so adamant about this is because they went through this S show with Lane Kiffin 3 years ago. Now, if you remember 3 years ago, the winter and the fall of 2022, that was the year that Auburn fired Brian Harsin, and Lane Kiffin emerged as the head coaching favorite in that job. Now, history tells us, we've found out the report since then, that Lane Kiffin's daughter at the 11th hour basically convinced him, hey, I just moved to Oxford. I don't want to move again. You need to stay. But he was ready to take that job. And more importantly, Ole Miss went through all of this 3-4 years ago. And so John Talty had some great behind-the-scenes reporting for CBS Sports. Matt, you could put up the first part of the John Talty interview, the board number 1. So this is what John Talty wrote for CBS Sports. In some ways, Kiffin's near decision to take the Auburn job helped spur Ole Miss into the moment that they're currently in. It prompted an NIL fundraising drive to compete with Auburn's perceived bigger war chest. Ole Miss fans rallied to do and give everything they had to do to keep Lane Kiffin in Oxford, to show him that he could have the resources necessary to win big. The problem was it was fraught at times, especially when an 8-1 season imploded into an 8-5 finish, which included an embarrassing Egg Bowl loss to Mississippi State, this during the 2022 season. This is according to John Talty. In a scene first reported in my book, quote, The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos, a prominent booster promised a $500,000 contribution to the NIL fund if Kiffin stayed at Ole Miss. After the loss to Mississippi State, the same booster gave an updated offer where he said, quote, I'll give that effer $500,000 to leave, not stay. That's how frustrating the whole process was by the end, and that booster wasn't alone in his thinking. And so I bring it up, Matt, we could save that second one for half a second. We'll get to that in a minute. But I bring that up because this is what Ole Miss dealt with the last time that Lane Kiffin was truly a candidate for all of these jobs. Now, remember, last year there were basically no jobs open of note. UCF and North Carolina, but there was really no coaching carousel last year. The year before, yes, it was Alabama, but he was never really a candidate there. And so I just bring it up because we forget 3 cycles ago, Ole Miss dealt with exactly this. And they're just like, we're not doing this again. And I think, again, they have basically said, and I think this is now starting to become the sentiment at Ole Miss. I was telling you, I was speaking with somebody pretty close to the situation down there. And he explained, he's like, we believe we have made this into a destination job. Now, we can argue about the good stuff, the bad stuff, the history of an LSU, the history of a Florida, the history of a this, the history of a that, the resources, the recruiting base. But basically, he said, look, we gave him everything. And you can now, I think, start to understand the frustration of Ole Miss fans is when you give everything, you give. Lane Kiffin, one of the highest paid coaches in college football. One of the best NIL resources in America. Listen, it's not perfect. The stadium is small. Lane Kiffin whined about the fans a few weeks ago. But, they were great for the Florida game. I forget who was the Citadel was the game before where they had trouble selling out. But it's like Oxford's a tiny little town. And the fact that they get 65,000 people there, Ole Miss is like, we've done everything for you. Enough is enough. And we're happy to keep supporting you at the level that we are, but at some point you got to reciprocate it and let us know that you actually want to be here. At some point you got to stop with all these softball interviews, and I'm not criticizing anybody who has interviewed Lane Kiffin, but you got to actually put your, not literal, but your figurative money where your mouth is. You say you're happy here. You say you've never been happier. You say you don't need to be at a blue blood to win in this era of college football. Well, at some point you got to step up to the plate and actually make a decision. The problem is the decision has not been made. To go back to the McAfee thing, I can't believe that he didn't give more clarification. I don't know why you do the interview if you're not going to give more clarification. All you're going to do is say, I did hot yoga with my AD. There's no ultimatum, and Kawan Lacey is the best running back in college football. Hey, can you give the fans that are giving you tens of thousands, if not millions, and the school that is giving you millions upon millions, can you give them a little bit more clarification? Is that too much more to ask? And I think when you can't give clarification, I do think it starts to question if you are really as committed. And if you're really, I think even the best way to put it, are you really as changed as you claim to be? Because you're telling us all things are different and you're different and you don't drink and you don't eat red meat and you do hot yoga and you've never been happier. Well, go ahead and prove it. And this brings us to the second part of that John Talty article, because I think there's some interesting insight there. And I think this is important. This is from John Talty. Quote, this is supposed to be the culmination of all the blood, sweat, and dollars spent to turn Ole Miss into a legitimate national championship contender. This should be the peak. Instead, Kiffin's public flirtation with 2 SEC rivals has sucked all of the oxygen out of the room. This isn't all Kiffin's fault. The brutal college football calendar has put him in a personally enviable yet impossible situation of having to manage outside interest while trying to finish the season out. Will they accept him back if he decides to say? Of course. But there is a growing fear within Ole Miss that Kiffin doesn't love the school quite as much as he's publicly professed. He has complained publicly and privately about the fan base, including a shot Saturday night about the crowd for the Citadel game. He's long been enamored with the idea of coaching a true blue blood again, an opportunity LSU and Florida are both eager to give him. This part of it wraps by saying, interestingly, as one booster who knows Kiffin well put it, he feels like he's already done it all in Oxford. He's run it like it's his town, the booster source said, and there's no chase for him anymore, and he's a chaser. The chase is gone. He's conquered it all. This via John Talty at CBS. Matt, do me a favor. Put the first part of that quote on again, because this to me is the important part and where I believe Ole Miss has a reason to be frustrated. Listen to this part. Kiffin's no. The first part of the second board. I apologize. Okay, this part. Thank you so much. This is where, if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'm furious. This is supposed to be the culmination of all the blood, sweat, and dollars spent to turn Ole Miss into a legitimate national championship contender. This should be the peak. Instead, Kiffin's public flirtation with 2 SEC schools has sucked all of the oxygen out of the room. Matt, you can put me back on screen. Get this handsome face on the screen, baby. But listen, this is why I side with Ole Miss fans. Listen, again, I understand the calendar is not perfect. My counter to that is the calendar is not designed for a guy who truly has a team that is good enough to win a national championship to leave for another job. That's not what the calendar is designed for. And so it's why I don't have sympathy for Ole Miss or for Lane Kiffin, and I do have sympathy for Ole Miss. And so it'll be interesting to see, but I think that last part becomes interesting as well. He's a chaser. He's chased everything there is to chase in this town, and he might be ready to move on. Listen, it's Lane Kiffin's life. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. But I do think two things are true. One, I do think he owes it to the school and the fan base and the players to give them an answer soon. If you're serious about other jobs, this can't go on. Again, I understand he's trying to do his due diligence because I've gotten a lot of people push back on that. The counter to that is there's a school right now that's paying you $10 million. Can you show a little bit of respect to them? By the way, all these coaches, we had John Summerall on the show a few weeks ago. He said, no distractions during the season. This coach, this one individual coach, not the DC Pete Golding, not the OC, not Kawan Lacey, not Trinidad Chambliss, the one singular person who is creating all of the conflict is Lane Kiffin. I think he owes it to Ole Miss. And I'll also say this. I do think, and again, I listed off the resume, left on a tarmac, left Tennessee in a situation where there was riots on campus, and I don't blame Tennessee fans. They had a right to be pissed, okay? Alabama, everything. And by the way, let's not forget how he left Alabama, got fired before a national championship game because he was too distracted. So maybe this is just who Lane Kiffin is, but the last thing I'll say is this. If it is who he is, then a lot of the crap he's been selling about how different he is, how much he's changed, the hot yoga this, no drinking that, and I give him credit. He's clearly trying to improve himself, but at the end of the day, put your money where your mouth is. Either step out the side and let the people that want to be there make a run at a championship, or the counter to that is, of course, commit to staying long-term. We will see what happens from there. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break because Ole Miss very much in the college football playoff picture. Speaking of the college football playoff picture, you know who else is? A lot of teams. The new rankings came out. There are a lot of people mad, and I think, frankly, they have justification to be mad. We'll explain that next. Rankings, sort of a disaster. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. So let's go ahead and keep the conversation going. A lot to discuss. College football playoff rankings are out. Lane Kiffin may or may not be part of it, but some of you are fans of Alabama, of BYU, of Oregon, of Indiana, of Texas A&M, you may need some college football playoff tickets. And so guess where you need to go? You need to go to SeatGeek. It is not only the official ticketing partner of the Aaron Torres pod, it is America's #1 ticketing app. Over 28 million downloads. How about that? 28 million. That's like the Aaron Torres pod. That's a lot of freaking downloads, okay? But what I love about SeatGeek is two things. One, every ticket on the app rated 1 through 10. Good to bad. They tell you the truth straight up. Every ticket, green dot or red dot. Green dot means go ahead and purchase that bad boy. Red dot means you probably want to stay away. But you know what I really love about SeatGeek? It's that they take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. This is all you got to do. Download the SeatGeek app. If you use promo code Torres, that's promo code TORRES, promo code Torres, it gets you $20 off your first purchase. You can do it for anything, by the way. You're a college hoops fan. Maybe you want to go to that UConn Arizona game tonight. Tickets are through the roof. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. You want to go to the college football playoff because you're an Indiana, A&M, Ohio State fan and your team is unbeatable? SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. By the way, I mentioned it the other day. Buddy bought Backstreet Boys tickets with the SeatGeek.com promo code Torres. People got mad because I said you got to rock out to the Backstreet Boys sometime. I'll just say this. As Conor McGregor once said, I want to apologize to absolutely nobody because the Backstreet Boys at the Sphere, yeah, I would do that if tickets weren't freaking $1 billion, okay? But that's why you need SeatGeek.com promo code Torres. SeatGeek.com promo code Torres. $20 off your first purchase. Whether you're going to the college football playoff, you're going to the Backstreet Boys, any ticket on SeatGeek, SeatGeek.com promo code Torres. And there will be no Backstreet Boys slander on the Aaron Torres pod. All right. You know what I do want to slander, though? College Football Playoff Committee. Goodness gracious. So the College Football Playoff Committee. So listen, let me even backtrack, right? Because I get two things in life can be true. I think it's stupid that we do rankings every single week because all it does is it backs the committee into a corner where they're supposed to change something, but nothing changes. So then they don't change it, but they still have to explain why the rankings are this and that. And it backs themselves into a corner. Okay. But what I will also say is that this time of year, as big games keep happening and losses keep accruing, there is a shakeup throughout this college football playoff. And so coming out of last weekend, I think there was so much fascination. This was one of the more anticipated college football playoff rankings, in my opinion, because of a couple simple things. We had Alabama, who I think coming into last week, they weren't ranked #1, but I think you can absolutely argue had the best resume. A win over Georgia is probably the best win anywhere in college football. A win over Tennessee, a win over Missouri, a win over Vandy, okay? So they had a great resume coming in. How far would they fall after a second loss? Texas, we have all, including me, made the argument, is Texas the best one-loss team best three-loss team in college football? And if they were to somehow beat A&M in 2 weeks, is that a team that should be in the mix? Well, I bring it up because the new college football playoff rankings are out. Not a lot of change at the top, but just for clarification, I'll go through the first 7 really quick, the first 8 really, because those kind of went as planned. Top 3 have not changed. Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, 1, 2, 3. Georgia at 4 moves up, obviously, after the Alabama loss, after the great Georgia win against Texas. Texas Tech sitting at number 5, 10-1 overall, the great win over BYU. Number 6, the Ole Miss Rebels. We don't know who's going to be coaching them in the college football playoff, but they're at number 6 at 10-1. Oregon, 9-1, which I think is kind of interesting. They don't have a lot of great wins. By the way, apparently the committee was crediting them for winning at Penn State, which means absolutely nothing because everybody does that now. So they're at number 7. 8 is Oklahoma. Okay. So why I'm stopping at 8, and Matt, you could keep the rankings on the ticker, is because after that is where it got interesting to me. The committee clearly has a Notre Dame problem. Notre Dame is 8-2. They have not lost since week 3. They lost their first 2 games. They had the early bye. So week 3, they lose to Texas A&M at home after losing to Miami. Well, Miami's a 2-loss team. What do you do with Miami, 2-loss team that has beaten Notre Dame? By the way, what do you do with Alabama that takes a second loss that has probably the worst loss of any true contender in Florida State, but also a bunch of great wins, including 3 wins now in the top 20 with Georgia, Georgia, Vandy, and Tennessee, not to mention Missouri is now back in the top 25 as well. So you have the Notre Dame, Alabama problem, or Notre Dame, Miami problem. You have the Alabama issue. And then there was another team that I was very curious to see, the BYU Cougars, because BYU has done everything the committee has asked. Beat all the teams they're supposed to. Great win over Utah. Only lost to a top 5 Texas Tech team, and strength of record, which we'll get into in a minute, is supposed to be an important metric. They are really high in. Well, guess what? BYU, as a one-loss power conference team, comes in at number 11 behind Alabama. And I just got to say, I understand the the Notre Dame versus Alabama debate. To me, it's not as interesting as why the heck is BYU behind Notre Dame. And I truly believe there is no team that is getting screwed harder by the College Football Playoff Committee than BYU. So let's go ahead and dive in. So first of all, as far as the Alabama stuff is concerned, I promise if you're a BYU fan, you're like, stop talking about Alabama. Matt, you can leave the logo up. It's fine. As far as Alabama is concerned, okay, why I'm not freaking out about Alabama. Alabama's path is ahead of them. They have to beat Auburn, and if they go to Auburn, they will go to the SEC championship game, and win or lose, they're in. Even at 10-3, the committee proved last year they are not. If you are good enough to make a power conference championship game and you're in position to make the playoff, you will not be punished if you lose. So for Alabama, it all comes down to that SEC, to the Auburn game. Beat Auburn on the road, you go to the SEC championship game, you're in. Now, if you win, you may be as high as the number 1 seed. If you lose, you might be as low as the 11 seed, but they're not going to leave out Alabama if they get in. So it comes down to, can you beat Auburn with an interim head coach at Jordan-Hare Stadium? It's that simple. This is why I am frustrated on behalf of BYU fans, and I would say on behalf of all Big 12 fans. It is because BYU has done everything you have asked. And unless there is absolute calamity in front of them, they have no path to the college football playoff other than winning the Big 12 championship game. And at that point, that probably knocks out Texas Tech, and Texas Tech and BYU both don't get in, and the Big 12 is once again a one-bid league. And so this is where my frustration is. This isn't stand up for BYU. This isn't stand up for Big 12. This is stand up for what's right and what the committee has told us they wanted. Okay? So BYU, let's just compare them to Notre Dame. Let's leave Alabama out of it because Alabama, whatever. By the way, the committee has a much bigger issue if USC beats Oregon this week, because all of a sudden it gets really jumbled with the 2-loss situation. Maybe that's another conversation, maybe for the Thursday show. Okay. But here's the thing with BYU. Okay. So what does BYU have on their resume? So first of all, they're sitting at 9-1 right now. Okay. So first of all, so 9-1 BYU versus 8-2 Notre Dame. Let's just talk about the facts. Okay, let's take out Alabama. Let's take out Oregon, who, by the way, Oregon actually has no real resume to speak of. I think if they lose to USC, they might be on the outside looking in of this college football playoff conversation. But as far as Notre Dame and BYU, let's look at the facts. Okay, so Notre Dame and BYU, and I think actually Notre Dame is good. But I am going off of what the committee has told us that they want. First of all, I know win-loss record doesn't matter, but they are, BYU is 9-1, Notre Dame is 8-2. Again, I understand win-loss record doesn't matter, right? This is where it gets more complicated. One, BYU, their best win is better than Notre Dame's. Their best win is against Utah, which, as you can see in the new college football playoff rankings, is number 12. That is better than any win that Notre Dame has. Their best win right now against number 15 USC. Now USC plays Oregon. We'll continue that conversation if it happens, if USC pulls off the upset this weekend. But right now, BYU, more wins. Best win is better than Notre Dame's. How about the losses? Well, you can't sit here and say, well, BYU, they took a bad loss. They lost to Texas Tech, who is 5th in the college football playoff rankings. So don't tell me that it's all about, they took a bad loss. They have a good win and they have a great loss. Okay. Notre Dame has a okay win and 2 good losses as well. So nothing adds up. But this is the part that actually really frustrates me, okay? This is the part that frustrates me. If you remember, coming into this year, the committee was adamant that they were going to use a new metric called strength of record, okay? Why does that matter? Strength of record is an analytic that was basically put in. It was basically, I called it at the time, the Indiana rule, the Indiana corollary, the anti-Indiana metric. If you go back to last year, there was a lot of pushback about putting Indiana in at 11-1 overall. And the argument is it can't just be about wins and losses, but who you play. And so the argument against Indiana was they played nobody. Most of their wins were over the bottom half of the Big Ten. They didn't play the best teams in the Big Ten except for Ohio State, which they lost to. And they went out of their way to make their out-of-conference schedule as easy as possible. And so it was a situation where they're getting a benefit for not even trying to schedule out of conference and playing the bottom half of the league. And if you remember last year specifically, the conversation centered around Indiana with no great wins but no bad losses, or Alabama, which had a couple great wins, Georgia last year, South Carolina, which was 9-3 and a good win last year, but they also had some bad losses as well. Vandy was unranked by the end of the year, 6-6. Oklahoma was 6-6, etc. And so that's a backstory to say the SEC made this huge stink about strength of record has to matter. And it can't just be about wins and losses. And sometimes 9-3 is better than 11-1. And I can't even argue with that. I agree fundamentally with that. Here is the issue. You know where BYU ranks in strength of record right now? They currently rank in strength of record number 6. Here are the only teams ahead of them, strength of record. Texas A&M, which any metric that says that Texas A&M strength of record is the best in the country is a stupid metric, but that's another conversation for another day. Texas A&M, Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Ole Miss. Those are the only teams ranked ahead of BYU in strength of record. You know who's not ranked ahead of BYU? Oregon. You know who's not ranked ahead of BYU? Alabama. Now, you could argue it's a stupid metric. Alabama should be higher, but Alabama is not ranked ahead of BYU. Oh, by the way, you know who's definitely not ranked ahead of BYU? Notre Dame, which comes in at number 12 in the same metric. And so I know I'm getting a little nerdy right now, but this is what drives me crazy, okay? If we are going to say that this metric or this matters or that matters, then that's fine. But we have to stick to it, okay? I'll give you a side example involving a person that we talk about a lot, right? We keep being told that it can't just be about wins and losses, but I will give Lane Kiffin credit. He is very vocal about why are we scheduling tough out of conference games? Because teams are only getting punished for playing them. But basically, they're not getting punished. They're not getting rewarded for winning them, and they are getting punished for losing them. And so his argument is Texas A&M went on the road and beat Notre Dame, and they would be punished if they had lost that game, but they're not really being credited for winning it because obviously it's a better win than anything, frankly, even Ohio State has. I know Ohio State beat Texas, but at Notre Dame is a better win than Texas at home. It's better than anything Indiana has. And so Lane Kiffin's point is don't tell us that scheduling tough out of conference games matter when we don't get rewarded and we only get punished. And so to me, that's the frustrating thing with this strength of record thing is if you told us it mattered in the preseason, that's fine. But we are now here. Real rankings are coming out, and it has to matter now that the games matter, now that the games are being played. And so that's the part that pisses me off. And the bigger picture, this is what pisses me off as well, is that every year, I hate to say it because I know the vast majority of fans in the chat are SEC fans. Every year, the SEC complains about whatever, about not getting enough teams in. And they want to change this, and they want to alter that, and they want to do this, and they want to do that. And then if it doesn't benefit them, then they're on to the next thing. So does strength of record matter or not? I'm sorry that I'm mad about this, but the whole conversation about the college football playoff drives me crazy because every year we change the rules. I'll give you a quick side story. This is so random. Years ago, I was at Mountain West Basketball Media Days, okay? You want a blast from the past? There was a guy named Larry Eustace who was the head coach at Colorado State at the time, okay? Larry Eustace is long retired, famous, by the way. This is an unbelievable story. Side tangent of the century. Larry Eustachy got fired in the early 2000s at Iowa State because he showed up at frat parties after the games. This was like a 45-year-old head coach showed up at frat parties after the games, okay? You can Google it. This was like right at the advent of the internet, and it was like, the pictures are ending up on message boards of him at parties. Anyway, years later, he was at Colorado State. Let me get back on track. And I remember being at Mountain West Media Days, and the year before, Colorado State had been one of the first 2 or 3 teams left out of the NCAA tournament. And I remember him being like, we did everything the committee asked, and then the committee changed the metrics on us in real time to put somebody else in. And that's exactly what they're doing to BYU. They're saying that strength of record matters, who you beat matters, where you play matters. And they're doing all of that. And oh, by the way, beat a 7-3 Arizona team that should be ranked. Beat a 7, they play Cincinnati this weekend. And so I don't want to get too fired up because BYU still has work to do. But the issue for me is this. Even if they take care of business, I don't know that they're going to do enough to put themselves in position where if they don't win the Big 12, they get into the playoff. And I think that's a shame. And so ultimately, I don't really care who gets in and who doesn't. I just want everybody to play by the same rules. And so everybody's focused on Bama versus Notre Dame. How about Notre Dame versus BYU? How about Notre Dame versus Oregon, which I think is an interesting conversation as well that nobody wants to talk about. So it's an unbelievable deal. And the last thing I'll say is this. I think BYU fans have a right to be mad. Kalani Sitake's way too nice to make a stink about it. And you know who else I'm actually a little bit disappointed in? Brett Yormark. Brett Yormark is the commissioner of the Big 12. Brett Yormark has done a great job of positioning the Big 12 as the definitive third best team in all of college sports. By the way, great pull by Matt. If you're a BYU fan just finding us, follow us on Twitter, Torres on BYU, okay? Torres on BYU on Twitter. I bring it up because Brett Yormark has done a great job positioning the Big 12 as the third best conference in college football, and he said in the preseason, we talked about it. I had producer Matt make me a reel about it when there was nothing to talk about in July. But Brett Yormark said, we're getting a second team in the college football playoff this year, mark my words. And I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said we expect to have 2 teams in the college football playoff. Well, it's time, Brett Yormark. You have 2 teams in position, so step up, be a commissioner, lead, and throw a fit. Why are you not out there leading this charge? It makes no sense to me. I think BYU fans have a right to be frustrated. I think Big 12 fans have a right to be frustrated. By the way, I think Texas Tech fans have a right to be frustrated too because the committee is basically painting them into a corner where if they don't win their season finale, they have a bye this week. If they don't win their season finale and if they don't win the Big 12, they can't get in either. And I think they're a pretty darn good team as well. So we'll see what happens. Plenty of time to figure this all out. BYU, by the way, to its, if you want to argue with me, that's fine. BYU does still have to beat a Cincinnati team that was ranked last week. They play them this weekend. And then BYU closes. I don't even know off the top of my head. Let's see here. BYU closes at home with UCF. Scott Frost, baby. I think they take care of UCF at home. The big one is they got to win this weekend. If they don't win this weekend, by the way, even the Big 12 standings go a little bit hectic. They might not make the Big 12 championship game. So just bring it up. I think BYU fans have a right to be frustrated. I'm frustrated on behalf of them, but it is what it is. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to take one more break. When we do, we'll get to any, Matt, if there's any questions about football before we transition to basketball, we'll take those. And then I would also add that at that point, we will then from there, by the way, as I log on to social media, somebody is the Twitter handle CFB Kings is bringing up this great point. The more you look at it, Oregon's resume isn't even close to BYU. So these are conversations that nobody besides me wants to have. But that's what I do. I fight for the little guy. By the way, I think Oregon's actually losing to USC this weekend, which creates a whole nother chaotic situation. Anyway, we're going to come back. Matt, if there's good football questions, let me know because I do want to switch to basketball. BYU, they got their coach in football. Can you get him to the playoffs? Their former coach in basketball. Ooh, buddy. It's getting hot in here. What is going on with Mark Pope and the Wildcats? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Kansas. We'll talk about a brawl in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, you know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. we got to go ahead and thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Yeah, you see the logo on the back of the screen right here. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauley Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge sports fan. And one day he was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to love, something my family's going to love, something I'm going to love. And so he came up with Cauley Puffs. This is the new age health food snack. You don't need to go to the grocery aisle and buy all that crap, the Doritos, the Fritos. No, my friends, you need Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But here's the best part. They taste freaking delicious. Actually, there's another best part. In addition to tasting delicious, in addition to being healthy, they are also taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Okay, so check this out. All you got to do is go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, and you can get 15% off any purchase with the promo code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. It's that simple. 15% off any purchase, one bag to try them out, 100 bags to cater a party. Doesn't really matter. Promo code Torres. CauleyPuffs.com gets you 15% off. Cauley Puffs also available on Amazon. You obviously can't get the promo code there, but CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to our friends at Cauley Puffs. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. By the way, I mentioned it the other day. Our Cauley Puffs rep, I got on the phone with him. You guys have been awesome about the Cauley Puffs stuff. So CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off. He was blown away by the numbers. So happy with them. If you have not ordered yet, CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres. And I think these are the perfect snack to have around the house for Thanksgiving. People are looking for something to snack on. Grab a bag, do whatever. Try them for yourself. CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres. Speaking of Cauley Puffs, Luke. Thank you, Matt, is what I meant to say. Luke, got to give the Cauley Puffs plug. So Luke is a member. He's a Torres super fan. Remember, we have the membership tier here on YouTube. It is $4.99 a month, but all it does is go to help the show. The bottom line is, we're going to be traveling a lot in January, February, and March, probably April as well. Doing interviews, on the scene stuff, active, engagements, in Indianapolis, things like that. So I bring it up because we do have a membership tier. Luke was our member of the month, and Cauley Puffs just took care of him. Luke is munching on Cauley Puffs maybe as we speak. I don't know. It is only 11:51 Eastern time. Great snack to get you through till the lunchtime window. CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres. All right, I want to get to some college hoops really quickly. Oh, boy. Love this. Luke says, I'm about to order a big bag of Cauley Puffs for my gluten-free sister and myself. Of course, they're pretty good. Listen, I'll say this, and I sincerely mean this. I'm not being sarcastic when I say it. Is that basically I don't promote products I don't believe in. Okay. So this isn't, some health, some food company is wants to promote on the pod. If I don't like the product, I'm not using it. So Cauley Puffs is the real deal. Luke's going to order some for his gluten-free sister. Thank you for your support, Luke. Matt, you can screenshot that. By the way, I'll also mention this. Stay tuned. We're going to be working with a skincare company, which again, you're going to make fun of me, Torres. Skincare. You're a dude. What do you need good skin for? What are you doing? You do a YouTube stream. Who cares? I'm just here to tell you. Skincare is the real deal. We'll give you some details on that in the coming days. But like I said, I don't promote products I don't believe in. Thank you to Cauley Puffs. Okay, let's get to a couple football things. Then we got to get to Mark Pope. Minty, a BYU fan, says, preach, Torres, preach. That is about BYU. Listen, BYU still got work to do. There's no doubt about it. But I always say this. My old radio partner, Arnie Spanier, who ironically is an Arizona fan. He's going to be at the Arizona UConn game tonight. But my old radio partner, Arnie Spanier, he's got this old, gravelly voice. And he always says, Torres, the show's tonight. And what that means is you can't start talking about hypotheticals of, well, if Notre Dame does this and if they beat, if USC loses and what about, no. We have to react to the polls in the moment. What is happening this second? What do we know right now? Not what could hypothetically happen 3 weeks down the road. And right now, BYU deserves to be ranked, frankly, at minimum, ahead of Oregon and Notre Dame, no doubt. I could go either way on Bama. Bama has 2 losses. They have a ton of great wins. They have the worst loss. I would probably rank Bama ahead of BYU and then BYU ahead of Oregon and Notre Dame. Sorry if that makes me controversial. Don't know if we have Oregon fans in the chat, but, as Conor McGregor once said, take this time to apologize to absolutely nobody. Let's keep it going. Any other questions in the chat before we switch gears over to basketball? Luke says the committee is penalizing Miami for inconsistency, yet propping up a Notre Dame team that they beat with the same record that struggled against awful teams like Boston College. It is clear brand bias. I'll tell you what, everyone is focused on the Miami versus Notre Dame thing. There is a very easy scenario where it gets even more convoluted this weekend. So we know Miami's beating Notre Dame. We know Notre Dame's beating USC. What if USC beats Oregon? If USC beats Oregon this weekend, let's do some mental math, people. And let's, of course, assume Notre Dame wins and Miami wins. Miami, 9-2. Notre Dame, 9-2. USC, 9-2. And, of course, on top of that, Oregon would be 9-2. In theory, by the committee, by what the public says, Miami should be ranked ahead of all of those teams. And I think that's where it'd be interesting if brand bias and bias in general comes in, right? We think Oregon is good. Why? Because they were good last year? I don't know. They don't have a resume that shows it. Now, if they beat USC, it's a different conversation. But if they fall to 10-2 or 9-2, and their best win is, I don't even know what it would be, I guess Iowa, they should not be ranked certainly ahead of USC, who they just lost to. But again, USC would have lost to Notre Dame. Notre Dame should have lost to Miami. Wouldn't that be funny if Miami all of a sudden now gets ranked ahead of Oregon, of course, the school that Mario Cristobal left and nobody feels guilty for. But I agree, though. The committee is it's brand bias. There's no reason that BYU, as I said, should be ranked below Notre Dame, below Oregon. You could make the argument either way for Alabama. Really quickly, 1 or 2 more footballs, and we'll get to basketball. Paul's so funny. I'm going back to the beginning of the show. He obviously joined midstream. He says, I will wait last for the CFP conversation, then argue. Tell Notre Dame to join an effing conference. I saw somebody say this on social. I can't remember who it was. I think it'll be interesting the deeper we get into this college playoff era. Notre Dame, as long as they're an independent, is not going to have big late season games. Remember, the USC Notre Dame thing, USC does not want to cancel the Notre Dame rivalry. That has been misreported. They're just saying, we don't want to play you at the middle of the year. If you want to play us week 1, week 2, week 3, but we have enough cross-country travel without a random trip to Notre Dame, random trip to South Bend in the middle of October. And so with Notre Dame, you take that game off the schedule, yeah, you'll get some ACC games. Yeah, you'll get Clemson at some point, and who knows how good Clemson's going to be. But it is an interesting thing of I like the independent thing. I have no issue with it. But as we get deeper into this playoff era, increasingly, I think Notre Dame's biggest games are going to be early in the year. And I think if they're not ready to go week 1, we're going to have situations like this. So I think it's fascinating. Paul says, join an effing conference. What if they just join the Sun Belt? How funny would we're going to the Sun Belt, play at Appalachian State. Screw you, Big Ten. Anyway, super random. I'm a little off cue. Any more football stuff? We'll get to basketball. A lot of Mark Pope talk. We got to get to Mark Pope talk. Okay. This is good from Kevin. I think, Kevin, correct me. I think you're some sort of SEC fan. So I like that Kevin is being honest. He said, I like Oregon, but if they don't get in and 2 Big 12 teams get in, I'm okay with that. Texas Tech and BYU should be in my opinion. Yeah, listen, I'm only going off what the committee has told us is important. And what they've told us is important is, again, strength of record. We're told that all 4 of these power conferences are the same. It doesn't feel that way. And all I'm saying is Oregon has no resume right now. And so, Notre Dame at least has that 1 top 15 win. Oregon has nothing on the resume. So, you talk about a big game, and we'll probably preview USC Oregon on Thursday's show. But goodness gracious, you just talk about a situation like Notre Dame's got to figure it out, or Notre Dame's, they better hope that USC wins this weekend. I think if they do, that's actually the best thing for Notre Dame and improves their win. I think Oregon is probably out if they were to lose this weekend against USC, and I think they should be. And again, it's assuming there's no chaos. Listen, BYU, as I said, they got to take care of business against Cincinnati. We'll see if they do. They have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they have fallen behind by double digits on the road to every single team they've played on the road this season in Big 12 play. So, can't be doing that against Cincinnati. All right. Should we switch gears to basketball? Let's switch gears to basketball. Because what a night it was in New York City. So Champions Classic, we talked about it yesterday's show. Champions Classic used to be really the big thing in college football or college basketball, that really was either the official or unofficial, starting point of the college basketball season. There were some years where it was actually played the first game of the year. There were some years where it was played like probably about 4 or 5 days into the season. For whatever reason, it got pushed back another week this year. And it was kind of interesting because to me, I think in some ways it hurt kind of the lead up to it. Kentucky already had a loss. Kansas doesn't have Darren Peterson. But I think the reverse is true as well. We have a little bit more context on these teams, meaning the stakes were a little bit higher when we got to Tuesday night. Well, the big game Tuesday night that everybody in the world of college basketball is certainly talking about. I'm going to flip up this collar here. Look like Johnny Cash, Man in Black. All right. The big game everybody was talking about, it was Michigan State versus Kentucky. Okay. And so we previewed it on Tuesday's show. But Michigan State, Kentucky, Michigan State had that great win over Arkansas. They held on to win late at home. Kentucky takes the loss to Louisville. And you're kind of just wondering, was it a fluky thing? It was on the road, true road game. Mikal Brown Jr. goes off. Is it a Louisville thing? Is it a Kentucky thing? Whatever. But Kentucky, they got to bounce back. Well, I think it's pretty safe to say they did not bounce back because they go to New York City and in just a butt-kicking, you can't say for the ages, but it certainly wasn't good. Final score, Michigan State 83, Kentucky 66. Kentucky suffers their second loss of the year. I know they're dealing with injuries, but this was not about injuries. This was about a no-show. This was about being not good at pretty much anything. And this is about first real drama of the Mark Pope era. I'm not going to go crazy and call for his this and to that and do that. But he has to respond. He has to respond in a hurry, and he needs answers because right now he doesn't have any. All right, so listen, after the game, I did a full reaction, okay? Spent about 25, 30 minutes. By the way, the mic got screwed up. Whenever, Matt, whenever you're not here, the mic always gets screwed up. It's unbelievable. It's like clockwork. Anyway, I bring it up to very simply say this, is that I did a full reaction. I'm not going to spend 25 minutes here breaking down the game itself. And I want to give Michigan State credit. They were the better team. They dictated things from the beginning. They are the deserving winner. As I joked, they have a very comfortable lead in the SEC standings right now because they've already beaten Arkansas. They've already beaten Kentucky. They deserve the credit. They deserve all the credit, right? And they deserve the credit. They were great on Tuesday night. But the story to me is about Kentucky. And the story to me is, I say during exhibition season, it's okay to react to these games. You don't want to overreact, but you don't want to react at all. But right now, we have a sample size on Kentucky that says they're not very good. And I think what was disappointing about the game on Tuesday night, they really weren't good at anything, okay? So Mark Pope, known as this innovative offensive guy, and again, we went more in depth on this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but Mark Pope is kind of known as this innovative offensive guy. And again, I understand he doesn't have his point guard, but at the end of the day, innovative offensive guy who, oh, by the way, I saw a lot of ISO one-on-one, trying to beat guys off the dribble, whatever. All the complaints I always hear about John Calipari's offense, oh, it's too much ISO. That was Kentucky for about half the game. I'm watching the game, Andrea Jelovic standing in the corner, Trent Noah standing in the corner. So the offense was bad. Doesn't help when the offense is bad and the defense remains terrible. And this is something I was just wrong on. I remember back when I was at Stadium Swim doing the season preview show saying, I know Mark Pope historically has not had great defensive teams, but there's so much size, so much length, so much athleticism on this team that he'll eventually figure it out. Well, fast forward, he clearly hasn't. And they're a disaster defensively. And the frustrating thing about Tuesday night, it wasn't just like I don't want to again dismiss what Michigan State did, but it was embarrassing the effort that that Kentucky gave against Michigan State. I told the story on Tuesday night. My wife was sitting there watching the game with me. We were eating dinner. My wife knows basketball a little bit. You know, she grew up in LA, Shaq and Kobe, all that, right? And so she could see. She was just like, oh, they're not even trying. And, you know, there was a play where Jasper Johnson got screened and didn't really fight through it. Brandon Garrison getting beat to every loose ball. And she's just like, wow, they're not even trying, are they? And I'm like, no, honey, they're not. Great eye by you. You've been watching a lot of basketball with Torres. Okay, she doesn't call me Torres. And then finally, the other thing, not good on offense, not good on defense, got killed on the glass. And that was my concern coming in because obviously their best, physical presence is not available in Jaden Quaintance. That's not an excuse, by the way. You knew he wasn't going to be available until January when you took him. So I'm sorry, I don't feel too bad. So it was really bad. We talked about a lot of this, but I'll also say this. The question now becomes, does Mark Pope have answers? And I think Mark Pope deserves all the criticism he's getting. I also think Mark Pope deserves some praise because he looked the cameras in the eye and he was not afraid to take ownership of the situation, to say that he's got to be better, and to say that he's got the answers. Matt, we have two pieces of sound. Let's start with the interview with Jeff Goodman of Field of 68, Mark Pope, after the game.
All right, Mark, this is probably, I think, as down as I've seen you, period, since I've known you. What are you going through right now in terms of the frustration after this loss?
Well, I don't want to take away anything from Michigan State because Tom is one of the great coaches in college basketball, and those guys played tough and together and hard and played well. Mostly just credit those guys, and we are facing a monumental challenge right now, and I'm excited to see if we can figure it out.
You hinted at something like this a week or so ago before the Louisville game or after the Louisville game. Did you sense that this has been kind of brewing throughout the preseason?
No. I'm disappointed with how disconnected we've been. I thought I had a better pulse. I thought I was doing a better job coaching than I'm doing right now. So it's been eye-opening for me a little bit. I'm a little bit surprised.
And by coaching, you're not talking about X's and O's as much as you're talking about getting these guys to play for the Kentucky name. Correct?
No, I think it's everything. I think it's developing a culture. It's the right care. It's the right focus. It's the right schemes. It's the right X's and O's. It's a poor job. The nice thing is I can fix it. Like, we can fix it, but it's a really disappointing result.
So that was Mark Pope after the game, and basically, I actually give him some credit to owning up to it, to basically saying, like, Goodman and I like Goodman. It was a good question. It wasn't a bad question, but when Pope said the coaching isn't good enough, Goodman said, well, you're not talking about X's and O's, you're talking about the behind the scenes stuff. And Pope was like, no, it's everything. Good questioning by Goodman. I thought it was a good answer by Pope. I thought what was as interesting was on the podium after the game in the general media scrum. Matt, play the sound.
I actually think I'm gonna temper my words right now. I actually think that our identity should be if you build an organization the right way, then your identity is not about an individual person. Your identity is about a collective group. And so it shouldn't matter if we had built a great organization and a great culture, which I've clearly failed to do up until today. But we won't fail this season. We just have failed up till today. And we will build an organization where it won't be disrupted every time someone steps in and steps out, because we'll have a team identity, not an individual identity. Until we get there, we're going to really struggle. That's my job. That's why Mitch brought me here. I'm doing it poorly. I won't do it poorly for much longer.
That was Mark Pope after the game. Listen, again, I know you don't get brownie points for answering questions bluntly and honestly, but I thought he answered all of those questions as well as you can. And I actually do respect the fact that he is not ducking from there's something not right behind the scenes, right? Because it'd be easy right now to just be like, everything's fine. We played two good teams. What are you talking? No. He's like, we got major problems and we got to fix them ASAP. And again, I'm not trying to like, oh, he's answering the questions the way they need to be answered. I think the big question now is, can he actually do it? By the way, before I get into my thoughts, I actually see a very good question here. It says, it might be NIL just making the players feel complacent. Pope needs to get them focused and on the same page. If they can do that, it's pretty scary. So I said this on Twitter on Tuesday night during the game. I said, I hate now in this era when every time something goes wrong, people blame it on NIL. I gave the example. Texas loses to Georgia in football. Everyone's like, I see Texas fans, our team's gone soft since NIL. It's like, your team has never been better in 15 years since NIL. Sometimes you just lose to other really good teams. Don't blame NIL. I do think to this comment, I do think that what I said on social media, I truly believe. And this comment was from Jamie. I said, I don't know if it's NIL. What I do know is that every cliche we hear about NIL appears to be the case with this team. The pieces don't fit. It was thrown together too fast. They don't play well together. And I think most importantly, they do not respond when things go sideways. So to get back to Mark Pope, great comment by Jamie, and we'll get to some other Kentucky comments before we get out of here. To the point that was just made, and to the point about Mark Pope's comments, to me, the question now becomes, can he fix it? And I think it's fair to be every emotion that a Kentucky fan has right now, I think is justifiable. If you want to sit here and say it's only November, okay. All I'll say though is we're 5-6 games into this season, they don't look even close. And so now the question becomes, what does Mark Pope do to fix it? And can he fix it? I think to me, number one, and I said this after the Louisville game, I think he's got to make some really tough decisions about who has earned playing time, because I'm looking at it from a distance. Only he knows what's going on in that building. And it feels to me like he is defaulting to his veterans because he feels like it's the right thing to do, or they give him the best chance to win. And so I bring it up because right now, those guys are not good enough. I said it after the Louisville game. Brandon Garrison, and by the way, I'm sorry if I'm picking on individuals. I don't care. It's the NIL era. These guys are getting paid a lot of money. You either produce or you get out of the way for somebody who will. And that would apply everywhere. That would apply at Kentucky. That applies to Texas football. That applies to UConn. If UConn gets bullied tonight against Arizona, it's fair to ask tough questions. And so this is the NIL era, and Brandon Garrison isn't good enough. Listen, I can't put a percentage on it, but it felt like 90% of the defensive breakdowns, at least in the first half, were Brandon Garrison related. Didn't fight through screens, got lost, got confused, took the wrong man. If you don't know your responsibilities, you cannot be on the court. And I think the crazy part about Brandon Garrison is that's one of the few spots where there's actually a guy that's earning playing time behind him in Malachi Moreno. I said it after the Louisville game. I'll say it again. I bury Brandon Garrison on the bench and say, if you're not ready to play, I cannot play you. And we'll wait till Jaden Quaynes comes back and we'll play Malachi Moreno 28 minutes a game, 32 minutes a game. Reese Potter, the kid who we had on the show, is redshirting right now. I'm going to take that red shirt off. I don't care. I got to win games now. I can't be worried about 2026, 2027. I got to win games now. And Brandon Garrison, you're not doing anything to help me win games. So that's one. Otega Owe, two. I said it. And by the way, there was a clip that I saw going viral right as we got on air of Otega Owe basically sort of kind of acknowledging that he's not giving 100%. Like he was kind of like, what do you need to do to change? He's like, I need to play better from start to finish. So with Otega Owe, listen, there's only one of two things. Either he's checked out or he's injured. And I said, if he's injured, do not play him. get him healthy. Turf toe's a nasty injury. Look, Joe Burrow has been out months because of turf toe. It's a nasty injury. But if you're not healthy enough to play, do not play. Put him on the bench. Give him a month off, because right now he's not helping and he's actively hurting you. And if he is healthy, then you lock him in a film room and you show him video after video of all his lousy body language, because it's not good enough. And so I don't know what's going on there, but I know the answer isn't to keep running him out there and playing him 32 minutes a game. What else? Those are the guys to me. Those are the guys that if I was a Kentucky fan, I'd be furious about. I'm not a Kentucky fan, and I'm furious about it right now. And I look at the rest of the situation. The other thing is, play the guys that are giving you effort, okay? Denzel Aberdeen, listen, I understand that the production, certainly against Michigan State, was not there. He really struggled, but he does seem to be the guy that, in my opinion, I think he's the one that's trying to take on a leadership role. This is a guy we know is coming off of a national championship last year at Florida. And he is the guy that appears to me to be trying to be a leader. 10 points on Tuesday night, but he was 1 of 8 from the field. So that is what it is. But at least he's trying. At least he's playing hard. I'd play him. Colin Chandler, I know he was in foul trouble. Not the best defensive player you have. He's playing hard. I'd play him. Cam Williams, I know it's up and down, but at least he's playing hard. I'd play him. And so to me, I don't have all the answers, and I hate to do this, and I hate to be that guy. I'm not the dude that's getting paid $5, $6, $7 million a year to have the answers. And I'm not the guy that put together this roster for $22 million. And I promise Kentucky fans, I'm not going to be the guy that keeps bringing it up, but this is part of the story. When we know that you spent the most of any team in college basketball, that's not internet rumors. It was first reported by David Sisk over the summer. He does an unbelievable job covering college basketball. And then it was reported by the Lexington Herald-Leader in the fall. The Lexington Herald-Leader is not making stuff up. So this is the roster, and I think it's fair to say, where did the money go? Who are you paying all this money to? And if you were going to spend all this money and go crazy, go get the guys that actually make a difference. Go get Donovan Dent. Go get, whoever, Yaxel. I don't know. Jaden Quaintance, obviously we'll see what he becomes, but I don't know what else there is to say. I think Mark Pope said the right things after the game. I'm not going to give him credit for answering tough questions at the podium because that's his job, but I do believe that he believes he can figure it out. But I think the big question now, is he going to be tough on these guys, right? And that was probably one of the big sentiments that I got from Kentucky fans after the game was, seems like a great guy to be around, seems like a great guy to coach for. But now that the going's getting tough, is he gonna get tough with it? So we'll see what happens. I don't know if he has the answers. It's a blessing and a curse. You got a couple games before December when things start to go really crazy. You got a couple games before that crazy stretch over a 4-week period. You played North Carolina at home, Gonzaga in Nashville, Indiana, which looks much improved, and then, of course, St. John's in Atlanta. Listen, I don't root for or against anybody, but Mark Pope says he's got the answers. We'll see if he does. Matt, I know there's a lot of Kentucky comments in the chat, so let's get to that before we wrap on college hoops. It's going to be a long show today, by the way. That's what we do on these live streams, baby. Luke says, perhaps Kentucky should reallocate $22 million to the football team to retain Cutter Boley and the promising young players. Who knew that Mark Stoops would be the only saving grace for Kentucky sports this fall? As a guy who's just crushed Kentucky football again and again, Mark Stoops again and again, they're a bright spot. I'll tell you what, we talked about the playoff rankings. You want to shake up those playoff rankings. Let's see if Kentucky can shock Vandy in Nashville this weekend. By the way, Torres on UK for all of your Kentucky commentary. Matt, any other Kentucky-related questions? Eric said they had no defense. They were bad on both sides of the ball. Zeroed out, Eric. Zeroed out. And every Kentucky fan has every right to be frustrated in this moment. It's not good enough on any end of the floor. And I understand you're down your point guard, but Denzel Aberdeen was supposed to be a good enough answer, and he just doesn't have help around him. The other thing that I didn't mention, Pope sold all offseason that, hey, the percentages of three-point shooters were not good coming in, but the counter to that is once they get in this system, the numbers will go up. They just might not have 3-point shooters, but I think I would be curious to see what it would look like with a healthy Jalen Lowe. I just think, nobody knows, but I don't think he's going to come back anytime soon. One or two more. Tam says, I think Mark Pope seems like he's about to have a real breakdown. He sounds really bad. He has a hard time answering questions. And yes, what a crazy game. And Bud Walton, we'll talk Nick Pringle in half a second. So really quick, as far as that's concerned, the one thing I will say, and I should have mentioned this earlier, I don't think that's an act. I don't think that is fake. I don't think that what he said is not real. Like what I think is this, and I was thinking about this, Matt, you could drop the question. So I was thinking about this, is I think everything that he said, that was his real emotion. And it was funny. It is funny, whatever, is that, I've been at BYU twice in the last year. Okay. We obviously went out for the games last year, was around that team as they got hot late. And then I went out to interview AJ DeBonsa during the summer. And I bring it up because when you're around the practice facility, you just start talking to people. And the one thing I will say, the people that I talked to that were part of both the Mark Pope era and the Kevin Young era, they talked openly about, like, I've never been around somebody that takes losses harder than Mark Pope. Now, if you're a BYU fan, that's not to say that Kevin Young doesn't take losses hard, but he's kind of got that NBA mindset. How do we get better? How do we improve? Whatever. And Mark Pope just goes into a shell. And so, he takes it really hard. Now, again, he takes it hard, but he's also got to be the guy that has the answers because, again, North Carolina, Gonzaga on a neutral, St. John's on a neutral, Indiana at home. It ain't getting any easier. And then, oh, by the way, SEC play comes, and Auburn's really good, Tennessee's good, Alabama's good, etc. Anything else on Pope, or should we switch gears? Because I do want to get to the rest of college basketball. You know what? BBN61 says, is Pope on the hot seat? No, he's not on the hot seat. I think it's fair to ask, though, and this is going to be a theme in college sports, is if they bottom out, like if they somehow, let's say they don't make the NCAA tournament, is he going to get any NIL funding next offseason? And if he doesn't, can he put together the kind of roster that is needed to win? That is a very fair question. I'm not doing the hot seat stuff now. It's way too early. I don't think it's fair to him, but they got to get some answers in a hurry. Let's go ahead and switch gears. Second game of the Champions Classic. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one only because it sort of went as planned. So Kansas plays Duke in the second game. This was supposed to be the big Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer game. Unfortunately, Darren Peterson, as we all know, is hurt, as we all know, is not playing. Duke was a 10.5-point favorite in the Circa Sportsbook. We talked about it on yesterday's show. Is that the biggest deficit? Kansas fans were saying they never remembered Bill Self being a 10.5-point underdog in any game. Well, Duke wins 78-66. So the Duke bettors end up cashing, even though this was a crazy game where Kansas, I thought, actually played really well. And so I want to take a minute here because, to me, listen, credit Duke. They get the win. They're really good. I picked them to go to the Final Four in the preseason, whatever. But at the same time, what I would also say is this. To me, the single biggest takeaway was not about Duke. We know Duke is good. But there has been a lot of talk about Darren Peterson. How healthy is he? The Kansas fans are convinced, like, he's trying to opt out of the season. Load management. He doesn't want to play. I've never really bought that. But what I would say is this. I think the players around him are much better than they get credit for. And I also believe that if you can get Darren Peterson healthy, if you can get him back on the court, I think in a year where the Big 12 is really good but wide open, I actually think Kansas is a Big 12 title contender. So let's go ahead and break it down. First of all, the Darren Peterson stuff. Okay, so if you're a college basketball fan, you've been following this to some degree, but it has been, in defense of Kansas fans, a weird deal, right? Plays early, plays against North Carolina, then he sits out a game. You don't really know what's going on. Then he sits out another game. And I think everybody was kind of under the impression of, like, dude, as long as he's back for Duke, we're not going to freak out. Well, not only is he not back for Duke, but before the game, Bill Self says, before the last game that Kansas played, so Kansas last played on Saturday at home. That was against Princeton. Okay, it was against Princeton. I apologize. I thought it was against North Dakota State for some reason. It was against Princeton. They do say that North Dakota State is the Princeton of the middle of North Dakota. Anyway, neither here nor there. Bill Self, before the game, said, it's day-to-day. We hope to have him back soon. And then after the game, completely changed his tune and was like, he could be out a while. So I understand why Kansas fans were frustrated and Kansas fans were confused and Kansas fans were worried. I don't buy the fact that this kid is trying to opt out or whatever. One, Bill Self said after the game on Tuesday against Duke that there really is no reason to rush him back. If he's not 100%, he's not going to give you what you need anyway. All you're doing is risking injury, and the team isn't what it's capable of being. But two, it makes no sense because it's not like Darren Peterson is the consensus #1 pick in the draft. We all saw A.J. DeBonsa against UConn the other night. A.J. DeBonsa is going to have moments where you're like, you cannot pass on him at #1. And I think increasingly that second tier is starting to look like a first tier. Mikael Brown Jr., I don't think he's the #1 overall pick, but is he 80% of Darren Peterson? And if Darren Peterson isn't playing, does he sneak up? Caleb Wilson is awesome. Chris Sinak Jr., I watched him against Auburn the other day. He's unbelievable. Nate Ament. And so Cam Boozer. And so I just bring it up because, should I throw in another name? I'll stop. But I just bring it up because it's not like Darren Peterson's the consensus #1 pick in the draft that he would opt out of the season in freaking November. One, all you're going to do is put up the red flags for NBA teams of either you don't care or you have major injuries that we have to worry about. But then two, conversely, what I would also say is this, is that the draft is so good, you could go from #1 pick to #8 pick really fast. So I think Darren Peterson's coming back. I'll be in Vegas for the Players Era next week. I'm hoping to see Darren Peterson in person. But to me, the story of this game is all of the guys around Darren Peterson. Because when I look at this group, what I see is a team, and I said it on yesterday's show, but I take it to another extreme today. What I see is a team that is not only very capable outside of Darren Peterson, I think the talent around him has been greatly underrated. Okay, so I watched that game. A couple things stand out. One, Flory Badunga, much improved. Okay, this was the player. Remember, he was a McDonald's All-American last year, comes in, struggles. There's a weird week where he enters the transfer portal. Nobody really figured out what was going on there, but had 14.6 rebounds against one of the best forwards he's going to face all year in Cam Boozer. Clearly improved, had a great game the other day. The other guys on this roster can play, though. You look at Trey White, as Matt has pointed out, 22 points in this game. I think it's interesting. Trey White is a guy he's played a ton of college basketball. Started at USC, goes to Louisville to play for Kenny Payne. Then last year he's at Illinois. Now he's at Kansas. That is a very good college basketball player. Is he going to play 15 years in the NBA? No. But is he an impact player at the college level? Absolutely. I believe I could be mistaken for McDonald's All-American. Melvin Council, really like what he brought to the table on Tuesday night. 15 points. Jay Billis was talking about comparing him to other former Kansas guards, etc. I like what I saw from them. I really did. Also, who else? I like some of the younger guys as well. The Cole Rosario kid who reclassified. I don't know if he's an NBA player next year, but 6'6", 6'7", shoots the crap out of the ball, super athletic. He had an unbelievable dunk in that game. And you're like, oh, that dude's an NBA wing. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow. And I hate to do, and I know he's a Hispanic dude, but does kind of have that Christian Brown feel to him of like, give him year 2, give him to year 3. I can see the comp. I could see the role that Christian Brown played. I could actually see more of the Ochai Agbaji kind of role of like the dude a year or 2 from now. I think he could be really good. I think he's an NBA player. Like I said, Christian Brown was kind of similar as a freshman. He's way ahead of where Christian Brown was as a freshman. Lastly, I'd say, I know he keeps getting in foul trouble. The kid Bryson Tiller, and I know there's a singer named Bryson Tiller as well. Kid Bryson Tiller is really good. 6'10", shoots the crap out of the ball. He needs to get in the paint a little bit more, needs to do a little bit more around the rim. But I think he's another one. Is like you give him time. This is a guy that's averaging as a redshirt freshman 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, shooting 50% from 3. Give him some time. That is an NBA player right there. he is capable of doing the job. And by the way, he's taken 14 threes this year. It's not like he's 1 of 2 from 3. He can shoot the 3. He's whatever. But I just bring it up because if you put Darren Peterson back into that lineup, that is a team that I am here to tell you can compete for the Big 12. Like, you look at the Big 12 right now. Arizona's really good. They go to UConn tonight. We'll preview that game, probably spend 5 minutes at the back end of the show talking about that. But Arizona's really good. I get it. Arizona, do they have that third guy right now behind Koa Pete and Jaden Bradley? They hope it's Braden Burries. We'll find out if it is. BYU, I like a lot, but what's going on with Kennard Davis? We'll figure that out over the next couple days. If he's not available, is Kansas fundamentally way worse than BYU? I don't see it. Texas Tech, I don't love. I don't really know what they have outside of JT Toppin and to a degree Christian Anderson. And so I just bring it up because, listen, Kansas fans think I don't like them. Kansas fans think I'm whatever. I got to give credit where it's due. Bill Self all offseason said, we like the pieces we have around Darren Peterson. We didn't go heavy in the portal. We went heavy in the portal last year, and it didn't work out with AJ Storr and all those guys that we all remember. Well, guess what? Is that if you look at what's going on right now, I just bring it up to say is that, Bill Self right now is looking, and we should have known that the Hall of Fame coach knew what he was talking about. But I just bring it up because you look at it right now. Bill Self was adamant that the pieces around Darren Peterson were really good. And I'm here to tell you, it certainly feels like that. I'm telling you, man, it really feels to me like Kansas can win the Big 12. Got to get Darren Peterson healthy, but I think he's going to get healthy. And I think the other thing, too, is you got to get him healthy in time where you're not at that point worried about, like you can't get him healthy so late that the resume has fallen apart. The good thing is at the Players Era event, you get a couple games that you might be able to win without him. Notre Dame, Syracuse next Monday and Tuesday. And then from there, we'll see who they play. So Kansas, we'll see. I came away more impressed by Kansas than I think, they deserve credit, I guess is the right way to put it. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears. Another game. I didn't think it was going to take an hour and a half to get into Arkansas and Winthrop. Okay. And it's funny because I wasn't really planning on talking Arkansas Winthrop. When I woke up yesterday, I didn't think we'd be breaking down Arkansas Winthrop. Certainly a very interesting game. Arkansas wins. The final score. Well, what did the final score end up being? 83-82? Was it something like that? All I know is this. Arkansas trailed 82-77 with about a minute 20 to go. 84-83 was the final score. Okay. So maybe, what was it? 83-78, maybe it was. I don't know. I bring it up because the end of this game was insane. Okay. So first of all, Arkansas, like I said, they trailed by 5 with about 90 seconds to go. They end up rallying. We're not going to break down the game, but the final minute and a half was just bananas. Tam in the chat brought it up a minute ago. So if you miss this game, again, Arkansas trailed by 5. 2 baskets cut the lead. They get the ball back on a fast break. Nick Pringle, the big guy, catches it, spins, goes in for a layup to give Arkansas a 1-point lead over Winthrop. Everybody's excited. They whatever, this and that. All of a sudden, he gets tangled up with the big guy from Lipscomb. Why am I saying Lipscomb? Winthrop. And all I see is him like holding the guy on the ground, looking like he's ready to punch him. And I'm like, what the heck just happened? And so you can see it here. But to be clear, Arkansas, because I know Arkansas fans are going to say you're crazy. The second and third replays, you could see pretty clearly what happened. And Matt, thank you for getting these pictures. This is great. For people who are watching on YouTube, please understand we cannot show game footage that's like literally we get this video taken down by YouTube. We could get potentially sued by ESPN. But you can see here, this whole thing happened because the Lipscomb player, I believe his name was Stinchcomb or something like that. I think he played at Indiana for a while. Grabs Pringle around the neck and throws him to the ground. So the initial reaction is it's Pringle's fault. Why is he ready to fight this guy? But when you see the second and third replay, you can see the arm around the neck throwing him to the ground. Now, the defenders of the player on Winthrop said this. They said that he got tangled up. He got tripped by his teammate who was on the ground. I don't care. What I will say is I will defend Nick Pringle to his death for this, because it appeared, whether it was intentional or not, the guy grabbed him around the neck and threw him to the ground. And so, frankly, I think in a lot of ways, everybody should be lucky it didn't escalate even more, because listen, we all know the emotions of the game and how this stuff happens. And, there could have been a fight, multiple players were ejected for leaving the bench. Thankfully this didn't happen with, 8 minutes to go, because DJ Wagner left the game, whatever. But what I will say is, anyone who's saying that it's Nick Pringle's fault, you're an idiot. I'm sorry, because I got a lot of that when I posted the video on social media. You're a freaking idiot. There's no other way to put it, because explain to me, a guy makes a go-ahead basket with 11 seconds to go to cap a 5-point deficit in a 5-point comeback, and his first reaction is to body slam and try to hurt somebody from another team. You're an idiot if you really think that. So it was a crazy ending. To the credit of Arkansas, they get the one defensive stop that they need, and they hold on to the win. So we get the win. And like I said, if Arkansas had lost, we certainly would have talked about this. If Arkansas had just won without the fight, I don't know that we would have. But I will say this, now that we got past the fight, let's talk a little bit about Arkansas, because those were the two reactions that I got when I posted the video. One was, you're either on team Nick Pringle or you're not. But two was people that didn't know the context of the game saying, wait, Arkansas was in a 1-point game with 11 seconds to go. Yeah, it was bad. So let's go ahead and talk about it really quick. Listen, the one thing I will say about the Arkansas situation, because it came on the heels of Kentucky losing, and there's always going to be the tie between those two schools. The one thing I will say about Arkansas, there's two reasons I'm not as worried about Arkansas as I am about Kentucky. One, John Calipari has a track record of always figuring it out. And you could sit there and say, whatever. But remember, last year, from 0-5 in the SEC to the Sweet 16. The year before, when he left Kentucky, everybody wants to say, oh, he stunk. They finished second in the SEC. They won at Arkansas. They won at Tennessee. That was the year Tennessee had Dalton Connect, and they won the SEC. Kentucky won at Tennessee late in the year. So Calipari has a track record of figuring it out. I think the other difference between Arkansas and the other teams that are struggling, including Kentucky, they got two dudes that can just take over games, right? Malik Thomas, listen, I'll say this. I knew how good Darius Acuff was. I did not know how good Malik Thomas was. In this game, 26 points, 10 of 20 from the field, 3 of 8 from 3. He was the guy that carried them late when they needed. Again, I knew Darius Acuff was good. I had no idea how good this guy was. I think the issues for Arkansas, though, are becoming multifold. I think one, the front court outside of Nick Pringle game-winning score and body slam, really, I don't know, is giving you what you were hoping for. Remember, what was the issue with Arkansas late in the year last year? Not enough front court depth. They got bullied on the boards against Texas Tech in the Elite Eight. And if you remember the Michigan State game this year, I said, that's my gripe. Everybody was focused about Calipari, last-minute offense, whatever, blah, 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 this and that. And what I said was, I don't know that I really care about the last-minute offense. What I actually care about is the fact that he spent all offseason saying we need to be tougher in the paint, and then you get beat up by Michigan State. Now, some of it is Michigan State is really good, but the other part is your big guys are not living up to expectations. And again, I'll say the same thing about Arkansas that I said about Kentucky a minute ago. It's the NIL era. I am not going to feel sorry about calling out individuals. Malik Ewan was paid a lot of money coming off of a season in which he averaged 14 and 8 against for Florida State, He's averaging 4 and 3 right now, really 5 and 3. Forgive me. That's, whatever, 1 point difference. He has not been good enough. Trevin Brazile has been inconsistent. Nick Pringle, up until the game, up until late, struggled in that game. And so the front court has to be better. And then I think, obviously, just the spacing, the ball movement, the offense has to be better, because this was a game where, as a team, you had 13 assists on 29 made field goals. That's not good enough. And by the way, you know who else that's not good enough for? John Calipari. I actually love this quote from John Calipari. Now, if you are listening in the car, Cal says a little 4-letter word in here, but basically he's asked about, why are you struggling on offense? What needs to get fixed? Matt, do we have the sound of John Calipari?
execution. How about we may go back to how you guys grew up, if any of you really ever played basketball, where you had to pass it 5 times before you shoot it. You all that do that? I think we're going to do that. 8th grade shit. We're going to go 8th grade. You got to pass it before 5 or 6 times. Coach Knight had a lot of fun doing that. That's how they played. The ball's moving, you're screening, and until we get to this, you're not shooting the ball. I mean, I'm not talking about transition. You know in transition, we're as good as anybody in the country. But until you rebound better and defend, you're going to end up playing them doing this and you coming down quick. You saw the first play of the first half. It's almost like I got to draw stuff up to get them to go from one side of the court to the other to do it. It's on me. It's not on them. So I got a lot of work to do.
So John Calipari saying it's on me, it's not on them. But again, to quote John Calipari, some 8th grade shit. We got to get this 8th grade shit going right now. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say, man. I can't be worried. I've seen this 20 times with Cal in the last 20 years. It's not always pretty early. He always gets it figured out late, including last year. And by the way, including last year with a much less talented roster. The other thing about Coach Cal, too, we talked about it earlier with Pope. Like, is Pope going to be hard on these guys? Cal will MF a guy, like, straight to his face. He doesn't care if you're a lottery pick or the last guy on the bench. Malik Ewan, congrats on that NIL check. If you're not doing what he wants, go sit your butt at the end of the bench. So, again, maybe some people are worried. I'm not. I don't want to say that I don't care, but I just think that it's going to take time. They're a work in progress, but we'll see what happens. Arkansas with one more game next Monday before the big Thanksgiving game against Duke. Remember, they play Duke on Thanksgiving night on CBS at 8 p.m. Eastern. By the way, I might have to sneak away from the Thanksgiving dinner table to maybe do a quick reaction before that game. All right, really quickly, this is the longest show that I think we've ever done. We have a top 10 matchup, top 5 matchup in Storrs, Connecticut tonight, okay? So this is kind of crazy. So this is the first top 5 matchup in Storrs since the 2006 season. Why is that important? Someone who was hosting this show was a student at UConn, and I was at that game. It was Villanova at UConn in Storrs, February of 2006. And it was kind of crazy because that was the year UConn and Villanova, people probably don't remember, but UConn and Villanova were the 2 best teams in the country all year long. Nova had Randy Foy, Kyle Lowry, Mike Nardi, who's now an assistant coach at UConn, ironically enough. Alan Ray, who was really good in that era. Curtis Sumter, blast from the past. UConn had Rudy Gay, Marcus Williams, Denham Brown, who got drafted, Josh Boone, et cetera, et cetera. What I remember about that game, now we're just blast from the past Torres time here, is what I remember is this, is that they played twice in a short window late in the year. The first was in Philadelphia on a big Monday. And you can go back and look. UConn that year was the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. So they were good all year. Hadn't lost in like 2 months. They go to Villanova on a big Monday and got destroyed. Villanova kicked their butts, okay? Well, they come back to Storrs a few weeks later, and it was, to this day, the best and loudest crowd environment I have ever been in college basketball. It was a war. I remember it was really cold that day, and we were still camping out. This is some stories from the camp out I won't get into. It was a female situation. We don't have to talk about that. But I bring it up because it was the craziest game that I have ever been to. UConn won. It was close at the half, and then the second half was an avalanche. And every time that Jay Wright called a timeout, every time that something crazy happened, it just got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder until the point that it was like, oh goodness, like it's over. It's a wrap. Unfortunately, UConn season peaked that year in that game because that was the year they ended up losing in the Elite Eight to George Mason. I bring it up because Wednesday night in Gamble Pavilion, first top 5 matchup in 19 years, 19 seasons, 20 seasons, whatever. And I'm really excited about this one. I'll be quick. I think what this game comes down to, Arizona, of course, has the wins over Florida and UCLA at this point. UConn with the win over BYU, which I did not get to talk about because we had technical difficulties with the show on Sunday morning. What I think this game comes down to is a couple things. One, for Arizona, they have to take the crowd out of the game. The crowd is going to be crazy. I think get-in price is like $200 at this point or something crazy like that. I told you my buddy Arnie Spanier actually was hitting me up for tickets. I'm like, dude, I cannot help you. $152 is the cheapest ticket, by the way. So bring it up solely to say that basically I think Arizona's got to take the crowd out of it. And then I do think the bigger question to me kind of does come down to, who is Arizona's third guy? I think this is going to be the consistent conversation about Arizona all season long of just Koa Pete's awesome. We saw him against Florida to open the season. Jaden Bradley is awesome. Third-year player, played at Alabama for a year, remember, all of that. So sorry, I'm sidetracked here. So Jaden Bradley was awesome against Florida. Koa Pete was awesome against Florida. The issue for Arizona, is there the third guy? Is there the third guy that is ready to step up and ready to do what it needs to be done offensively? Because if it's Braden Burries, so Braden Burries was the other McDonald's All-American that came in, he's really struggling, but that's the guy that Arizona really needs to get going. If they can get him going, that is a national championship, no doubt about it. You got three guys, you're big in the front court, you're athletic, you can shoot, you can do everything, but you need that third guy. For UConn, I think my big question about them is pretty straightforward. Do they have an answer for Koa Pete? Because this is the issue with Arizona, is UConn really plays one traditional big, Torres Reed. The issue becomes Arizona plays two. They have Krivas, the big center, and then they have Koa Pete at the four. And so UConn's got to decide, is Torres Reed guarding Krivas? Is he guarding Koa Pete? Is he guarding, I guess in theory, neither? And then if he is guarding Krivas, Koa Pete's going up against Alex Caravan, who's about, 200, probably 20 pounds. Koa Pete will probably have about 30 pounds on him. So that to me is the X factor. By the way, if you put Torres Reed on Koa Pete, then whoever is guarding Krivas is going to be at a size disadvantage. So that to me is the X factor. Those are the X factors. I think from UConn's perspective, the positives are Alex Caravan and Silas Demery both got going against BYU. Silas Demery is the point guard. Dan Hurley had basically said last week, hey, he and I are fighting, but it's a good thing. We got to work to get to him to where he needs to be. He was awesome against BYU. Caravan, who struggled so much last year, seems to be playing well. I could do 10 more minutes on this game, but we're at almost 2 hours of a live show. So we'll go ahead and wrap very simply. I will say UConn wins 81-76. I think it's going to be a great game. I think these are two of legitimately the top 5 to 10 teams in the country. And I'll take UConn to win because they're at home. By the way, we will certainly be talking about it on this game. On tomorrow's show, I mean. All right, let's go ahead and get out of here because goodness gracious, what a show that was. If you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, by the way, here we go here. Jamie says Koa Pete probably the best freshman in college basketball. He might be the best college player. We don't know how he's going to project as a pro. I don't care about that stuff. I'm not an NBA draft podcast. We don't. He might be the best player in college. He might be the best freshman in college basketball. Need more Arkansas talk, Jamie? Trust me, you're going to get plenty next week because we'll preview the Arkansas Duke game next week. And then, oh, by the way, we will maybe come on live after the Arkansas game Thanksgiving night to discuss it. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. If you're not subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. We're going to get out of here. We'll be back live. We will be back live on Thursday morning to recap it all. But I'm going to roll. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. Thank you to SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase. Callie Puffs, 15% off with promo code Torres. Thank you to Circa. Circa, I'm going to see you next week. I cannot wait. See y'all soon.